All right, this is my John Deere 7000 conservation planter that I've built essentially from the frame up here this spring. I've had a couple people kind of ask me what it is and how it works, and so I thought I'd do a quick little video just to go through the components of the planter. I've been thinking a little bit about how I want to do this video, and I think the best way to do it is by system, and I'll start with the row units here. So these are Max-Emerge Plus vacuum meter row units. There is a Hekla top drive that essentially, once the planter is down, this wheel contacts the wheel of the planter and starts turning here. That wheel turns a shaft that goes across here and then down to the transmission. This transmission is what determines the planting rate, or how many seeds per acre I'm planting. Had to do a little bit of modification there, just as this is a pretty much custom built planter, but essentially you can change these sprockets around to determine how many plants per acre you're putting down. Out of the transmission is 2 shafts, and each of these shafts go to a row unit. So over here the shaft comes through, and these are John Deere Pro drives. There's a cable inside, and as this shaft turns, that cable turns and it runs the row unit. These up here are your seed hoppers. That's what you fill with your seed. Still have a little bit of corn seed in there, and that corn seed drops into the meter. Pull one of these off really quick. Set the phone down. Alright, so on your meter there's a vacuum hose that I'll talk about later. Open this up. These are E-set meters. This is the seed disc. There's essentially a vacuum, just like a vacuum that you'd use to clean your house, that holds a pressure or a reduced pressure on this side. And then as this meter turns, each one of these little holes here picks up a seed. And then I open up the meters here. You can see inside the seed drops to the bottom. It would be picked up by the seed plate in here, and as it goes around it hits something called a singulator, which essentially just makes sure that there's only one seed per cell, or one seed per hole in that seed disc. So you're only planting one seed at a time at a very precise spacing, and you're not getting anything that they call like a skip or a double. So as this seed comes around, there's a seal that cuts out the vacuum, so the seed falls out and goes down here and goes down the seed tube. Seed tube's down here, and that falls down through the row unit into the trench. That trench is created by these 2 discs here that are called openers. They slice open the ground and create a seed trench for that seed to lay in. On each side of your row unit are these things called gauge wheels. These are adjustable, but this is essentially how you set your depth of your seed trench. So as you're going along the ground, these come up and turn, and then obviously there's what's keeping you at a consistent depth. This last thing down here is called a Keaton seed firmer, and that makes sure that that seed falls in the trench and is seated at the bottom of the seed trench before that seed trench is closed by these closing wheels. These are called spoked closing wheels, and essentially they just turn as you're going across the ground and make sure that your seed trench is zipped back together and closed, so that seed is sitting with some good seed to soil contact. I have totally tubular 2O liquid fertilizer placement on this planter. So basically as I'm going across the ground, fertilizer is coming out of each one of these tubes, and it's just dribbling that fertilizer on top of the ground. That fertilizer system is driven by this pump in here. That's what's pumping the fertilizer to every individual row unit. And then obviously I have 2 tanks on either side. Fertilizer is placed onto the planter here, goes through a filter and then up into each one of these tanks. That'll go down into the pump. I did elect to put air force on this planter. So I got a compressor on the front here that pumps up, and then that inflates these airbags. And depending on how much pressure I have in the airbags, that determines how much force is putting down on these row units into the ground. So you don't want too much pressure because your row units won't flex at all as they're going across the ground, and those gauge wheels will actually pack the ground and contribute to poor emergence or poor seed growing conditions, and so you might not see them all come up. Or if you have it too loose, you're not going to get consistent depth, and that row unit as it goes across the ground might hit a harder spot of ground and rise up. So I guess the last thing I'll talk about here is the vacuum. That's just essentially a hydraulic motor or a fan that goes around and creates a vacuum. And then that vacuum goes along each one of these pipes and then down these tubes to the seed meter, and that's what holds the seed in the seed tubes. So hopefully this is a good quick video on how a corn planter works. I have a Gen 1 2020 monitor in my tractor, and I might have a quick little video on that and how that works that I can include here, but let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.